It would appear that IGN has released another very, very bad review of a game that I think a lot of people are going to enjoy. One thing that I would like to mention right off the bat is that I don't want anyone harassing the journalist that made this review, and I don't want any of that.
When I reviewed the original Octopath Traveler almost 5 years ago, I absolutely loved it. I was completely smitten with its art style, its spiritual and artistic connections to the 16-bit JRPGs I grew up with, and its amazing battle system. Playing Octopath Traveler 2, I was excited to see everything I loved about the original return. What's surprising, however, is how little it's advanced in the last half-decade.
This is definitely the first problem that I have with this review. The journalist says that this game barely added anything, which I find to be a very interesting statement.
In fact, outside of the specific stories being told, Octopath Traveler 2 is almost indistinguishable from its predecessor. That means it's just as great in many ways.
Indistinguishable. Are you serious? I get it. I get where you're coming from. The art style is basically the same. But there's so many other things. There's so many new things.
But that lack of novelty also makes it a little less magical the second time around. Because Octopath Traveler 2 is so similar to its excellent predecessor, there's no reason not to go back and play the original first. But the stories aren't directly connected either, so if you're considering starting the journey here, you should know that once again the name Octopath refers to the 8 playable characters and the paths they follow through the world. Areas are more or less locked out by their difficulty level. For example, if you enter...
Okay, yeah. Some areas probably are locked out by their difficulty level. My only issue with this criticism is that if you really know what you're doing, levels don't really matter that much. When I played the first game, I beat all 4 secret sub-job bosses. I don't think I was supposed to be there yet, because it was a level 50 area, and I want to say I had at least 2 characters in my party, and this was my main party, who didn't even have... They weren't even at level 40. And I managed to pull it off because I had a really solid strategy.
I'll just do this instead.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you. I don't blame you.
Yes! Yes! Oh my gosh, yes! Yes!
Let's go.
Let's go, dude!
I understand this criticism, but I don't think being in a high level area is necessarily something that is sort of blocking you from freely exploring the world. After all, there is this feature called Flee.
Enter an area with a danger level 16 and you're level 5, you're going to be murdered pretty much instantly upon your first encounter. Now you might be thinking to yourself, but I'm a seasoned JRPG veteran. I know a thing or two about how to approach high level zones.
Yeah, I do know a thing or two.
But I'm here to tell you that you're wrong. If the area says it's 16, you best have a party of characters at or above level 16. Once you do begin wandering in your level appropriate areas, you'll come across new towns with new characters. Upon meeting a new character, you're given the option to play through their first chapter or just add them to your party. I like that it gives you the choice, since I prefer powering my way through games and asking questions later, but what I didn't like was discovering fairly late in the campaign how important it is to actually play through each chapter yourself. You're just going to have to trust me to avoid spoilers, but it's too bad it ends up feeling like a deceptive choice. Day or night can be toggled at will, so it's more like switching between modes than something you have to wait around for. You see, each character has a pair of abilities, one for the day and one for the night. It's pretty great because there are some characters you need to interact with who only show up at night, so you can just switch at will rather than drudge across town and visit an inn or just wait for the time to change. Throne, the thief I chose as my starting character, pickpockets people during the day and ambushes them by night, putting them to sleep. The ambush skill is useful, say, when a doorway is blocked by an NPC, and pickpocket is a great way to load up on items without having to visit the shops. It's win-win. Other characters' abilities include recruiting townspeople to summon during battles, fighting townspeople to learn special combat moves, and capturing monsters to call back in during encounters, just to name a few.
Okay, I like that the journalist does mention these things. These things are really nice additions, and I think that these additions make this game better than the original. So anyways, let's continue.
Some of them are basically reskins of other characters' abilities. Like recruiting followers is the most common of the skills, for example, but it comes in really handy when you have 2 or 3 extra sets of hands that you can summon during a battle. I like the system because it lets you pick and choose companions for future fights, but you can also just steal their stuff too, and they don't even mind. Each of the 8 characters has their own multi-chapter story to progress through, but I really liked how they're all quite different in tone and scope. For example, Hiroki's tale starts off with what's definitely the most...
The guy literally doesn't even remember Hikari's name. He doesn't even remember the man's name, and he's supposedly played through the entire game. How do you get his name wrong? Like, I get, okay, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt here. I understand that this guy probably does not know how to speak Japanese, so maybe it's difficult for some people to get Japanese names correctly. But if you play this game for long enough, you will remember everyone's names. Like, how do you even get his name wrong? Like, what? I feel like whenever a journalist makes a bad review, there's always that one part of the video essay where you're just like, okay, yeah, this guy clearly does not know what he's talking about. For me at least, I feel like this is that exact moment. You know that this guy doesn't entirely know what he's talking about when he can't even remember Hikari's name. He can't even pronounce it correctly.
epic and open of them all, and most typical of what you'd expect in a massive 80-hour JRPG like this. Meanwhile, Partitio's is much more humble, and yet this simple merchant's story surprised me and ended up being my favorite out of all of them. I especially enjoyed the way Casti's played out, with some entertaining fourth wall breaking moments. In fact, I found all of the individual stories' conclusions satisfying, even if the paths leading up to them didn't always resonate with me, particularly the ones with less at stake. Again, it makes sense once you've completed them, but it's harder to savor a story about a clumsy dancer trying to become famous in the moment when someone else is fighting to take back the stolen throne of their country. But all the stories are a definite improvement from the original, even if HBO isn't going to be optioning any of them for a...
Yeah, I do agree. A lot of the stories are an improvement over the original game. I actually think that they're not only an improvement, but they're a major improvement. The hunter in the original game kind of had a boring story, in my opinion. But in the second game, the hunter seems to have a way better story. I'm not trying to hate on Honnet or anything, but Ochette might have a really good story in this game. It's looking to be that way. I played the demo. It seems that her story is probably gonna be a pretty solid story. And not only that, but I think Ochette might be the most broken character in the game.
gritty drama anytime soon. It's fortunate that I'm still a fan of the excellent turn-based battle system from the first game because it returns almost unchanged here. Each enemy has one more weak point to uncover by hitting them with a weapon or elemental attack. When you find the weakness of an enemy type, one of the little boxes below them will turn into an icon representing that attack, so you always know going forward, hey, this guy is allergic to ice.
I'm not entirely sure if barely unchanged is the right way to describe the battle system. The core concepts are still here, but I think there were some things that were definitely changed. From my point of view, latent powers completely changed the meta of the whole combat system. At least that's how I see it. I think these completely just shake it up a bit. To say that the combat system only changed a little bit is kind of an understatement, in my personal opinion.
Really enjoy the extra dimension this system brings to fights, forcing me to think hard about the fastest way to break an enemy's weaknesses while saving my best attacks to maximize their impact. My one complaint with uncovering weak points is that after a lifetime of turn-based JRPGs, I've grown accustomed to a certain predictability with them, but enemy weaknesses here often feel entirely random. If you encounter an enemy that's clearly made of ice, the vocabulary of JRPGs and, physics would suggest that creature is going to be weak to fire, but in Octopath Traveler, that's rarely the case at all. That frozen elemental could actually be weak to light magic, or to ice for some reason. It seems very arbitrary. I'm glad I didn't have to uncover weaknesses every time.
I kind of understand why someone would find that frustrating. If you're dealing with an enemy that lives in a snowy region, it would make sense if they were allergic to fire. But some of these enemies are not allergic to fire. I understand this complaint, but I don't think it's a huge deal. And I think it's actually a good thing that some of the predictability is not in this game, because it forces you to actually solve a puzzle here instead of already knowing the answer to the puzzle before you even begin.
Because there is a fair amount of grinding involved in Octopath Traveler 2, which obviously opinions differ on the subject, but I find grinding in RPGs almost meditative.
I wouldn't say that this game has a whole lot of grinding. Once again, I don't entirely know for sure how much grinding is in the game, because as of recording this video, we are still 2 days away from the game releasing. However, I can tell you that when I played the original game, I rarely had to grind at all. And the main reason why I didn't really have to grind that much in the game is because when you travel to the next area, you're gonna have to kill enemies along the way. What I'm trying to say is that it doesn't really feel like you're grinding most of the time, because when you complete someone's chapter, you can either go to their next chapter or go to someone else's next chapter. For example, when I started out with Oberic, I completed everyone else's chapter 1 before I did his chapter 2, which meant that by the time I did Oberic's chapter 2, I never felt like I had to grind for it, because I already technically grinded Oberic's character up to the recommended level because I was helping everybody else complete their chapter 1s.
As long as putting in a little extra effort before a boss battle pays off in the end. You won't progress your party if you don't spend some time on that grind, as the leveling required to get to the next part of the story isn't achieved simply by following the path laid out. You can brute force your way through some of the earlier bosses, just like in any JRPG, but the ability systems, weakness exploits, and battle point bonuses forced me to get pretty strategic with my thinking in order to do.
You have to be strategic all the time in this game. That's the point. It's not like almost every other turn-based RPG where you just mindlessly, continuously hit the enemy and then you occasionally heal when your HP gets lower. No, this combat system adds so much more depth to the combat. You know what? I'm gonna say it. Octopath Traveler is one of my favorite games ever, and the reason why is because, in my view, it is one of the few turn-based RPGs that is, quite frankly, not boring to play. I said it. You heard me. I said it.
Do so. That being said, the final boss sucks so very much.
Once again, I have not played the game yet because it hasn't even released yet. I have played the demo, but obviously the demo doesn't let you fight against the final boss. I would not be surprised if the final boss sucked because the secret final boss kinda sucked in the first game. I will admit that I have not made it to the secret final boss yet in the first game, but I have a lot of friends who made it to the secret final boss, and I have a few who actually beat it. And they all agree that the final boss kinda sucks. So I would not be surprised if the final boss sucked in this second game as well. This game is doing so many things better than the original game. And one of the things that the journalist does not mention in the review is how much better the music is. The music is so much better. And there's so many other quality of life improvements that are just not mentioned.
Once again, I am smitten by Octopath Traveler and its style, but 5 years after the original, it doesn't quite hit as hard. So little has changed about its battles, and this sequel sticks a little too close.
Of course nothing has changed all that much. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Everybody knows that.
To the original systems without expanding on them too much. Especially now that the 2D, 3D art style is an established look, the still lovely visuals just don't stand out as much anymore. That said, the combat system is still quite fun, and figuring out the best course of action to exploit weak points, knock an enemy unconscious, and then unload on them with as much power as you can remains a very satisfying pace. I did find myself much more invested in the characters and their stories this time around, and the way it comes together in the end is more interesting and cohesive than the first. If you liked Octopath Traveler, or even any of the Bravely Default games, Octopath Traveler 2 is another good old-fashioned 80-hour JRPG. It just might be one you feel like you've played before. For more, check out our reviews of Theater Rhythm, Final Bar Line, or Fire.
Okay. This is the reason why I have a problem with this review. Because this game is way better than the original. It's adding so many things to the formula. So what if they're using the same basic concepts from the original game? Once again, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Octopath 1 looks like a proof of concept compared to Octopath 2. Octopath 2 feels like the concepts from Octopath 1 are being fully realized, because now we're getting a more fleshed out combat system. We're getting better stories. We're getting absolutely broken party members. And get this, the devs actually listened to the fans, and we are getting intertwined stories between characters in this game. And I assume there's going to be a better build up to the final boss. I don't know if the final boss is as terrible as the journalist says it is, because I don't even have the game yet because it hasn't come out yet. Given what I know about Octopath Traveler 2 so far, I think that it is already better than the original game. And I think a 7 out of 10 is kind of a stupid score, honestly. I think that at the least, this game deserves an 8 out of 10. Oh, and get this. Get this, guys. Not only did Octopath Traveler 2 get a crappy review, but check this out. Check this out.
Forward to going back.
The original Octopath Traveler got a 9.3.
Back to complete all 8, explore the
Seth Macy, this is a guy who did it. Let's go back to the other video.
We're not
Let's go back here. This is the exact same guy. So let me get this straight. You gave the original game a 9.3. I think that the original game actually deserves an 8 because there were some problems in the first game that a lot of fans were vocal about. 9.3 is ridiculous. 9 out of 10, I could see that, but 9.3, no. So, let's go back to the review of the second game. You're telling me that this game, which greatly improves off of the original game, gets a lower score than the original game. You're telling me that a game which got a 9.3 out of 10 is now having a sequel that is getting a 7 out of 10, despite the fact that the second game is just simply better. They've added so many new things, and yet it's getting a 7 out of 10. So yeah, this is a pretty stupid review, honestly.